I am pleased to introduce the Reverend Dr. Andrea Ayvazyan. Her talk is entitled Creating Conversations, the Role of Allies as Agents of Change. As I was thinking about today and thinking about that topic, I, on the weekends, like to, a little treat, I go to Cafe Coco for soup. I like their soup. So I was sitting there having soup yesterday, and I was sitting next to a former faculty member's son. And this former faculty member had helped start the Women's Studies program. And her son was sitting with his two kids. And I was reading a book that was given to me by one of her colleagues, Phyllis Naiman. And I was thinking about the comment that the granddaughter of one of our faculty members turned to her brother, who's been sort of ravaged by cerebral palsy, and the family were sitting together, and she said, the granddaughter said, "I love you guys." And it was very powerful for a pre-K young child, but it didn't surprise me, given the genetics and the sort of environment that child grew up in. And I know that through these conversations and through the conversations on this campus, not only is there an opportunity to impact our lives, but we're impacting the lives of our children and their children, and we're impacting the lives of our community. I couldn't help but think of that yesterday. Since 1995, she has served as Mount Holyoke College, as the Dean of Religious Life and the Protestant Chaplain. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Oberlin College, a Bachelor of Science from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, a Master of Science from Duke, a Master of Divinity from Yale, and a PhD in Racial and Ethnic Studies from the Graduate School of the Union Institute. Reverend Ayvazyan is a longtime activist for peace and social justice. Explains your warmth about coming to GCC. Beginning with her involvement in the anti-war and the women's movement of the early 70s, the Reverend Ayvazyan has devoted her life to the causes of nonviolence, race and gender equity, gay and lesbian civil rights, and environmental sustainability. An anti-racism educator since 1985, Dr. Ayvazyan has traveled nationwide offering workshops and seminars in the nonprofit world, working primarily in schools and on college campuses. The author of many articles, books, educational materials, reports. Dr. Ayvazyan has a book coming out called Psalms in Ordinary Voices, and that should be published in 2006. So we look forward to that. Please welcome to GCC and welcome back, Dr. Ayvazyan.
Thank you. I am very honored to be welcomed to GCC by the president of the institution. That doesn't often happen for me, so I'm very honored and very pleased. And I also have been saying to everybody I've met this morning that I am delighted to be back at GCC, as I said to your president, because I love my visits up here and have been here to work with students and to speak to faculty and staff over the years a number of times with Beverly Daniel Tatum and on my own. So thank you for welcoming me back to Greenfield Community College. It is truly my honor and delight to be here. What I wanted to do, and I want to thank Ann Wiley, who has helped me prepare to be with you today. I'm going to watch the clock and offer some comments, and then Ann and I thought that we would open the floor to some back and forth, some questions and answers, or your thoughts and feelings, examples from in your lives, examples at GCC, and then Ann tells me we need to vacate the room, that there's other folks coming in here for a class, and we will go to the cafe, continue the conversation, and close at 2:30. So I'm assuming that when we close at 5:01, we're really just at a comma. We're pausing, but not ending. So I'm very delighted to be here and to talk to you about the role of allies as agents of change. And there are several points I want to make to throw out, and then I hope generate dialogue and get you talking with each other and with me. The first point that I'd like to make is that when we talk about allies, the role of allies as agents of change, I'm going to be stepping away from that, but I have a big voice. Can you all hear me fine? You can hear me fine, right? Who are allies? Well, allies are those people, let's back up. There are 7 forms of systematic oppression in society, 7 ways that some group gets the systematic unearned advantage and some group is systematically disadvantaged. And there are 7 forms in this society, and my comments will be particularly focused on this country. So let's not extrapolate to the whole world. You can in your questions and answers. But when we think about the USA and New England and Greenfield Community College, there are 7 forms of systematic oppression in society, and you know these: racism, sexism, heterosexism, classism, ageism, ableism, and religious oppression. We used to call it anti-Semitism. In my field of anti-bias education, we no longer call it that because anti-Semitism was used incorrectly for so long. When we think of anti-Semitism now, we think of, don't you think of anti-Jewish behaviors and attitudes? Isn't that what comes to mind? It actually is anti-Semitic people, and Semites are Jews and Arabs. The Semitic people are Jews and Arabs, and nobody ever uses it as anti-Arab oppression too, so we say religious oppression. And in any form of those 7 forms of systematic oppression, there is a dominant group that gets the unearned benefit, advantage, privilege, and there is the targeted group. So in racism, I am clearly in the dominant group. As a white person, I get the daily, relentless, and constant unearned advantage. And people of color, who make up about 30% in the United States today, are the targeted group. In sexism, I would be targeted as a woman and men would be dominant. In heterosexism, I'm using myself as an example, am dominant as a heterosexual, and gay men, lesbians, transgendered persons, and bisexual would be targeted. So in every form of this systematic oppression, there's dominant and targeted people. An ally, to get back to the title of my talk, an ally is anyone who receives the unearned advantage, who is dominant in any form of systematic oppression, whether they are Christians or able-bodied people or men or heterosexuals or whites, anybody who is dominant, who works for the dismantling of the oppression in which they receive the benefit. So it's white people who work against racism, men who work to combat sexism, heterosexuals worried about the civil rights and civil liberties of gay people. And allies have a very, very important role in the struggle against oppression because due to the nature of oppression, some people receiving the unearned advantage and having a disproportionate amount of power in society, and I'm talking about access to social, political, and economic power, because of that built-in disproportion, allies have a very loud, amplified, and powerful voice with other people like them. So when I talk about anti-racism to other white people, I, because of racism, have credibility. Does this make sense? People hear me because I am dominant, and because of the differential in power, racism causes me to have an amplified and a more powerful voice. When I talk to men about sexism, the opposite is true. I'm much less powerful, I'm much less believed. People think it's my special pleading and it's exaggerated and it's special interest. Is this making sense? So oh, you're so responsive, thank you. You all just like nodded and moaned or something. It was great, that was great. So you can imagine that, you can't imagine, but I will tell you that years ago I did anti-sexism workshops for groups of men and women. They were sort of empowerment experiences for women and anti-sexism workshops for men, and I no longer do those because I found it so exhausting to have to convince men constantly of the differential in social, political, and economic power to talk about sexism. So I actually don't do workshops in the area where I'm targeted, but I do work in every one of the areas where I am dominant. So I work for the civil rights and civil liberties of gay people as a heterosexual person. I do anti-racism work as a white person. I work against religious oppression as a Christian, actually as a pastor. I'm a minister in the United Church of Christ. So allies have a very powerful role in dismantling oppression because our voice is heard. My guess is that you're sitting here thinking about the 7 forms of systematic oppression in your lives and where you are dominant and targeted. And I think it's important at this point to point out, am I talking too fast? No. Can you listen fast? Good, because I don't have a ton of time, so I'm kind of talking fast. Is that okay? Oh, I like you all. You're so, you like are awake and you talk to me. This is great. This happens at GCC. You know, you go someplace and people are like, oh, all right, yeah, whatever. My son's favorite word, whatever. Anyway, back to task. Where was I? Allies have powerful voices. Allies have powerful voices, yes. And we also have multiple social identities. So that very few of us, if I said, would you raise your hand if you're dominant? You would all say, in what? I'm dominant in some things and I'm targeted in others. So you couldn't raise your hand. If I said, if you raise your hand if you're dominant in racism, the white people would. But if I said, would you raise your hand if you're dominant in sexism, the men would. We have multiple social identities. So we do what I call the oppression shuffle, which is when I think about I'm dominant as a white, I'm dominant as a heterosexual, but I'm targeted as a woman. And a white man might come up and say, I'm dominant as a white, I'm dominant as a man, but I'm gay, or I'm Jewish. So we do this kind of oppression shuffle. So allies have a very, very powerful role, and any women in the room know what it is like when a man interrupts sexism. Whether you're in a classroom or a boardroom or a lecture hall or sitting on the United Way board in Northampton, which I did for many years, it's very powerful when a man would say, gee, I think we've overlooked the voices of the women in the room. It is much more powerful than if I say, I think you're overlooking the voices of the women in the room. And they all say, Andrea, you know, you said that before. You know, we're tired of hearing that from you. And I become a broken record, but when Henry or Jack or John or Hank says it, it's sort of like, oh my goodness, that must be true. So I am encouraging us as allies to be vocal and visible and prominent and brave. To say that thing that's hanging in the air that isn't being said but needs to be said by a white person. To say that thing, not that we would ever speak for people of color. I could never do that or would want to do that. But I can speak as a white who is walking shoulder to shoulder as a partner with people of color working to dismantle racism. Okay, a couple more points before I open the floor. The experience in the world of what dominance and what targeted people need and feel and experience is very, very different. Let's talk about those for a minute, and then I want to talk about stumbling blocks for allies, where we trip, where we mean well and do badly, and then I want to open the floor. For dominant folks in any form of systematic oppression, it could be heterosexism or ableism or ageism, but I'm going to use racism. For dominant folks and targeted folks, the experience, the challenges, and the needs are quite different. Let's look at those briefly together. In racism, for example, but we literally, if we were doing a workshop and I was going to be with you all day, we could plug in a different form of oppression and actually look at the experiences and the needs for different targeted groups and different dominant groups. But in racism, a dominant group, let's look at the challenge, the goals, and the needs. The challenge for dominance in racism, or white people, white women, men and women, is to really take in and absorb and understand the constant, relentless, and deep level of unearned advantage or privilege, often called white privilege, that we have. It is very hard for us to see. Asking a white person to see and feel and experience their white privilege every day and every hour is kind of like asking fish to notice water. What water? I swim in it. So you say to white people, how are you advantaged today or over-advantaged today simply because you have white skin? And they say, I don't know what you're talking about. Or maybe they can think of vague remote example. When I used to teach at the Smith College School for Social Work, a required course for the MSW students on racism, I made them leave the first day of class and come back with a list of 24 ways they were over-advantaged that week or that day. They could walk around town, they could go to the art museum, they could see how they were overrepresented in the New York Times or the Daily Hampshire Gazette that day. They could go shopping at CVS. They could have an interaction with a cop. They could do anything they wanted. But they were overadvantaged in every form of their lives. So a challenge for whites, for dominance and racism, is to understand how deeply and fully being privileged has affected our lives, has given us a kind of leg up. I always have a sense that somebody is running ahead of me and saying, here, Andrea, here's a leg up. You want to get an apartment in Northampton? Here's a leg up. You want to get a loan for a house that you could just barely afford, you and your partner? Here's a leg up. You want to get into this college or that program? Here's a leg up. A goal, then, is, as I've said before, to be a strong, clear, visible, and brave ally, to actually name advantage and to work to dismantle racism. And the needs for dominance, I think there are mainly three. One is to investigate one's own socialization, to look hard at how we were raised and what we learned and what we're still absorbing, or what I call being contaminated daily by the cultural images and messages that continue to tell us that we are better or more credible or more beautiful. To investigate one's own socialization. Number two, to connect with other allies. It is very hard to be a sole voice, a lone ally. I need to know that Anne and other friends of mine are out there doing this work too, because I can get discouraged and I need to take hands with others doing this work. So to connect, allies need allies. And the third is to continually, over and over, commit to continued growth. Because people get tired and they sort of take a month or a year or a decade off. This work needs us to stay focused and committed over time. Making sense? Mm-hmm. There you go. Okay. Let's move to targeted and again use racism and again talk about challenges, goals, and needs. Okay? If you're targeted by racism in America, you are African American or Asian American or Latina, Latino, Latina, or Chicano, Chicana, or you're Native American or American Indian or an indigenous person, or it's better to refer to the nation, the Sioux Nation or the Cherokee Nation or whatever it would be. But it's those four areas, makes up about 30% of our population in 2005. If you are targeted by what we now call neo-racism, any of you heard that term? People know that term? They're calling neo-racism the racism of this millennium. Used to be called racism, you know this stuff, Catherine. It used to be called just plain racism, but now it's being called neo-racism. Anybody guess why? It's gotten subtler. Used to be easier to see, used to be more in our face, used to be more direct, used to be more visible. Now it's subtler. It's been very quietly and fully institutionalized. So neo-racism is the racism of this millennium. It's sort of become part of the fabric of our life and easier to deny. So it's subtler, but still is that differential in social, economic, and political power, okay? So if you are targeted by neo-racism, the racism of this millennium, and have an unequal access to social, political, and economic power, what is the challenge for you, what is the goal for you, and what is the need for you? Again, I am now quoting the work of Beverly Daniel Tatum and Bailey Jackson and other scholars in the field. This is not my creation at this point. Ken Jones is another I'm quoting. But I have read and been told that the challenge for folks who are targeted by racism is to overcome something called IRO, or internalized racist oppression, which is, anybody know that term? Yes, a bunch of you do. It's when you start to believe the negative press that's out there about you in society, and you start to cooperate or to agree with it. So, internalized oppression or internalized racist oppression would be that your high school is going to put on Macbeth. And the tape that comes up for you in your mind, and you are an African-American girl, is they will never cast me in a leading role. They are going to cast white people as Lady Macbeth in all the major roles, and I won't even audition. That's IRO, okay? You take yourself even out of the running. It's the kid I talked to in Amherst years ago when I said, you are so smart, you are good looking, why are you doing this ghetto rapper gangster thing? And he said, look, and I think there's a very clear choice for black kids in Amherst. This is years ago. He said, I think you can be smarter, you can be cool, He had absolutely no knowledge of how you could be smart and cool, even though that option was open to all the white kids who were topping the honor roll and athletes and cool and going to the prom. And he saw a clear bifurcation. You could be smart or you could be cool and uncool. All right? That's IRO. Because there is no, he couldn't think of an identity that had him being smart and cool. Making sense? Internalized sexist depression, when women start to believe the negative press out there on them, is when they hit about the 6th grade and say, I can't do math. You with me? That's internalized depression. I can't do math. Watch me study psychology, which is wonderful, or English, which is wonderful, but taking themselves out of the math and sciences, which is why I come to you from Mount Holyoke College, which is an entire institution that says to women, you can do math, you can do physics, you can do chemistry, you can do anything. So every year at graduation, the top physics award goes to a woman. Every year at graduation, the top chemistry award goes to a woman. The top math award, because in other schools, those prizes tend to go to the men. That's internalized depression. Making sense? So, you're so right. So, the challenge is to look at a name and stop agreeing with internalized depression. To stop agreeing with it. To stop cooperating, to stop. I mean, if you want to choose gangster, ghetto talk, the outlaw rap, choose it, but understand you can also be top in your class. You can also take anybody you want to the prom. You can also try out for Macbeth. That everything's open to you. You don't have a narrow view. So we talk about empowerment being the great challenge for people who are targeted, whether they're women or gay people or black people or Latinas, being fully empowered, being fully strong, being fully who you are, being fully proud to be a gay man or a lesbian, or a Chicana, or a Vietnamese American, to be fully stepping into your power. So the goal is personal empowerment and collective or group empowerment, that you are proud of your sisters and brothers in your targeted group. And the needs are generally 3. Well, I mean, there's many more needs than 3. That was a mistake. But there are 3 that I wrote down. 3 needs for targeted people are: 1, targeted people tend to need separate time and space. Don't make them assimilate and interact with dominance all the time. Women need a women's group, gay people need a gay empowerment group, black students need the Black Student Union, Asian students need the Asian Student Alliance. There is a need to separate because research shows that if you separate, you are more likely to reintegrate and have cross-race or cross-faith or cross-gender or cross-anything alliances and connections that are deep and meaningful. So generally, there's a need for a separate time and space. 2, targeted people need role models. They need to be able to see if that kid in Amherst had seen that the top in the class, I think he was a sophomore, I can't remember, this was years ago, but if you had seen a senior boy or a senior boy, or male or female, who was top in their class and cool and an athlete and of color, there may have been some sense that he could do that too. Does that make sense? But those being everything was always reserved for the white people. So we need role models. We need targeted people need role models to say, I can be like her. She's a mathematician, she's a physicist, she's an out lesbian and the president of a college. Hampshire College has just hired an out gay man as its president. Ralph. Pretty fabulous. I should know Ralph's name. I can't think. Everybody now on the campus is running around saying, Ralph's coming. I can't think what Ralph's last name is. But that's a pretty fabulous thing, because many, many, many gay youth can say, he did it, he's there, he'll understand. And the day of his announcement, he said, I'd like my partner to come up on the stage. And his partner, Manfred, whose name I also can't remember, came forward and he said, we will be joining you in August. Here we are. That's a role model. People can say that is a pretty wonderful thing. And the last thing that is on my list, but you probably are thinking of many others, is the needs that targeted people have is the need for allies. That you just plain need, sitting in the United Way board meeting, you need a man to say, we're overlooking all the input and the feedback of the women. And then you can say, amen, thank you, can we talk about this? But having somebody interrupt the cycle of oppression and step forward. So the challenge is overcoming internalized oppression. The goal is personal and collective group empowerment. The needs are separate time and space, role models and allies. Make sense? Okay, can I go on for another minute and then open the floor? Are you still listening fast? You still are? You're good at listening fast, because I'm giving you a run for your money up here. I'm talking so fast. Well, I took a 1-hour speech that I wrote and sort of went, freeze-dried it, right down to the essentials. Common stumbling blocks for those who are dominant. There are 4 of them, and then I'll quit, and then you can talk, okay? Common stumbling blocks for those who are dominant. Again, if we bring it down to race, if we take race, but remember, we could actually take any form of systematic oppression. We could give examples in sexism, heterosexism, ageism, religious oppression. Let's stay with race. The most common stumbling blocks for those who mean well but do badly. In racism, whites who really, really want to make a difference and want to do well but stumble. The first is the inability to fully grasp privilege. To be able to say something sort of minor about it, but not get how it is a relentless, daily, ongoing issue, that it is daily, that I am overprivileged here today, always. I am overrepresented at this moment in our government, have been since we wrote a Constitution, overrepresented in today's New York Times. As my friend Ken Jones used to say, gee, if you read the Boston Globe, the New York Times, or the LA Times, it seems like white people make news and black people make trouble. I am safer. I drove up here. I was running a little bit late, so I'm embarrassed to say I went over the speed limit. I was going to meet Ann, and I really had to get here, and I took a phone call I shouldn't have taken, so I left too late. So as I'm zipping up 91, I was aware of the fact that should I be stopped, and there was one of those cops, you know, they hide at one of those, they hide out in that little place on 91 and zip it, and I realized when I passed him, and he didn't stop me, which was by chance, that in any interaction with the police, I am statistically safer than if you make me African American as a woman, and I'm far safer if you make me an African American man who may not survive the interaction, even when they have just been speeding. So the inability for dominant people to fully recognize how over-advantaged they are is the first stumbling block. We also do a thing called universalize our individual experience. In other words, we take what we experience and make it what everyone experiences. So we'll say, I went to Franklin Medical Center and they were wonderful to me. Well, good. Try being black and poor. Try being Latina and, dominants often take their experience and individualize and universalize it. I went to the Holyoke Mall. They are not racist. They didn't follow me around the record store. Try being young, of color, and wearing a hooded sweatshirt. And see if you're followed around the record store. So we universalize our individual experience. So the first stumbling block is the inability to fully grasp privilege. Now I've really got to speed up. That was a joke. Number two, and I really am going to make these brief. Number 2 stumbling block for dominance is the inability to listen deeply and believe. Dominants are very, very good at finishing sentences, knowing better, second-guessing. We are not really good at listening. We actually, men, whites, Christians, able-bodied people, heterosexuals, are really good at knowing better and actually finishing the sentences for targeted people. And even if we listen, we are creating our response or our defense while we're listening. Do you know that feeling? So you're like having this whole other thing, and then you have your defense ready. And the third thing is that we don't believe. People of color tell us things, and we don't believe it is true. I think one of the most radical things I decided to do a number of years ago was to listen to targeted people and believe them, including when they said, Andrea, your racism is showing. Instead of saying, that can't be, I've worked so hard on these issues, you don't know how far I've come, I have a PhD in racial and ethnic studies, it can't be. Now I say, thank you, tell me more. Literally, thank you for giving me a gift so I can grow. This is hard. It is hard to hear you say that. I try hard, but I'm a work in progress. Tell me more. What did I do now? If a person of color is not calling you on your racism, it's because you're not talking about it enough. It's because you're not engaged enough. If you talk about this, your stuff will show. And all of us got misinformation, inaccurate history, missing history, biased junk and stereotypes in our little smart brains, and our stuff shows. And if you're not being told that your racism is showing, you're not working on racism enough. You still with me? Number 3, strong allied behavior. Allies are often hindered by a fear of embarrassment and failure. I'll say the wrong thing, I will be embarrassed, I will put my foot in my mouth, I'm gonna be really embarrassed, I'm gonna fail at this, da-da-da-da-da. If you are working on this issue, if you are working on anti-racism, I can absolutely guarantee that yes, you will do badly. You will do badly. You didn't get a degree in this, I have a degree in this and I do badly. You didn't learn this right, you will tread into places you don't know, you will try and stand up for something and be told you're like a total embarrassment. You will do badly. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Do not let your fear be bigger than your commitment. Make your commitment bigger than your fear. You will do badly. If you are an ally out there trying to work for the civil rights and civil liberties of gay people, trying to work for the dismantling of racism, trying to work against oppression, targeted people will be very, very forgiving, and they will forgive you for doing badly. But if you are not active on these issues because you are afraid of embarrassment, you need to get over that and pull your ego into check, because I am telling you, you will do badly. You cannot do perfectly. Do it anyway. Lonnie Guinier said, it is better to be vaguely right than completely wrong. And I think it is better to do something rather than nothing. So just take a deep breath and go forward. It is good to do something. And people of color and other targeted people will forgive you. Number 4, and the last of these, targeted dominants often mean well and do badly because they can't, and I said this before so I can be quick, because dominants run out of energy and can't sustain the commitment. It's not okay to do anti-racism for a season, or a course, or a project. We sort of settle in, because until full justice and fairness and equity it dawns on the horizon in this country, we've got a lot of work to do. So we need to not get distracted and not too busy, but to actually maintain decades of commitment on these issues. I know we have come far in Massachusetts on gay and lesbian civil rights and civil liberties. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. I know we've come far as a nation on issues of dismantling racism, but it doesn't look like equity out there yet. We have far to go for women still. We have far to go on these issues. So settling in to be a powerful, committed, long-term, courageous voice for fairness and equity and justice is just, I think, one of the things that is the most important thing in life and gives our lives meaning. And so we go ever onward. So that is a once-over lightly of the role of allies and agents of change. And I would just say, you are doing many of these things. Keep on keeping on. Stay strong, stay focused, and take hands with each other so you can keep going on this difficult journey. Thank you.